second to hit record. All right, so welcome to the April National Heritage Area Best Practices Call. My name is Heather Wickens, one of the founding members of the National Heritage Area Best Practices Call. We are so glad that you are joining us today. Today's topic, we are going to be talking really about cultural arts programs in national heritage areas. It's part of a two-part series, which we'll be sharing a little bit about more later in the call. Next month's call will also talk about arts and heritage areas, although on a slightly different track, but we will get to that at the end of the call. Joining us today, we have representatives from three national heritage areas, Sangre de Cristo, Blue Ridge National Heritage Area, and Rivers of Steel National Heritage Area. And to start off our call today, we're going to turn it over to Sangre de Cristo, and joining us from that heritage area is Julie Chacon. Julie?
Hi, I'm Executive Director Julie Chacon from the Sangre de Cristo National Heritage Area. And I was asked to talk about some of our textile art that's been done here within our heritage and culture within our area. The first person I want to talk about was Epi Archuleta, and I'm going to bring up a picture about Epi. Here she is with some of her artwork in the background. Can you see that?
No, I think you have to click the share the screen button, Julie.
Okay, let's see. Share the screen.
And then just click on the picture.
Okay, she's not there. Okay. Well, I can send you guys pictures and everything after the event, after this best practices call. So Epi Archuleta, she was born in 1922 in Mendales, New Mexico. She was an American master weaver and textile artisan. She is a fifth generation weaver. Her father was a school teacher and became a postmaster. He was also a weaver and taught his wife and some native people from Chimayo. Let's see, everyone supported the family by weaving. At an early age, Epi learned about collecting plants and using them to dye wool. She made all of her yarn from scratch, from shearing the sheep, gathering the dyes from the plants, dyeing the yarn, weaving the yarn, making her art. And again, I'll share this with everybody after. She said that she liked to use the plants from New Mexico because they had more vibrant colors. And she thought probably because the weather was a lot hotter down there. She did make her second home in Colorado within our heritage area. Her second home was in my hometown, Capulene, Colorado. So in 1940, she married Francisco Archuleta. And in the late 40s, they moved to the San Luis Valley, which was in Capulene, Colorado, with their 8 children. Epi did her own spinning and weaving at night after a long day of cooking for her family. The reason she liked doing her weaving at night was because everybody was asleep and nobody would bother her and she could do her own thing. She purchased a wool mill in 1989 and produced her yarn. And the yarn she used also sold to weavers throughout the United States. Her actual weaving has incorporated several styles of Hispanic and Native American weaving, but has also reflected some contemporary designs. The National Endowment of the Arts awarded Epi a National Heritage Fellowship in 1985, the nation's highest honor in folk and traditional arts. In 1997, she was inducted into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame, and Epi was awarded a Master's Award for a Lifetime Achievement from Spanish Market of Santa Fe in 2001. Among some of the locations of her work, she is displayed throughout the country, also at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Epi was actually a close personal friend of mine growing up. Her son was also my best friend's dad, so he was my second dad. So we spent a lot of time with Epi learning how to weave. It is definitely an art. It takes imagination. It takes a lot of time. The designs that she worked with, are very unique, very, they're just beautiful. When you get the pictures, like I said, you can see them then. Let's see if this one will, no. So yeah, that one's about Epi and her weaving. The other textile art that I'll talk about briefly is the colcha embroidery. With colcha embroidery, what that is usually in our tradition, sometimes a lot of people do it on their own, but sometimes they had colcha circles where women would get together and create different pieces that they would hang on the walls, tapestries and stuff. What they do with colcha is it tells a story. So a lot of the colcha work that we have seen has been stories within communities, within families, and it tells the story of their generation, their history, their traditions, maybe some events. Again, what they do is they make their own yarn, they dye it, they spin it, and they make those from scratch. We have a 30-minute documentary available also on our website and our YouTube channel. We collaborated with Northern Rio Grande National Heritage Area to create this documentary. And so in that documentary, they have several women within Northern New Mexico and Southern Colorado that actually got together, talked about their pieces. A lot of them were some award winners. Again, that documentary has a lot of details in there. And again, I'll send all this information to Heather that she can share with you guys after the call. So that's all I have right now. I'm sure you guys will have more questions when you see the pictures, but does anybody have any questions now?
I don't. Can we hold questions till we finish? Julie, I know you have to get on to another call, but can we hold questions or do you need to take them now?
I can hold and I can answer them after through email as well. Once you share everything, if they want more questions, I can answer them then.
Okay. All right.
Put questions in the chat too. I'll monitor that as well for the speakers.
Yes. If you do have questions, you can put them in the chat. And because I know Julie does have to leave before the call finishes today if we go long. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. Okay, it is now my privilege to turn us to Blue Ridge National Heritage Area. And joining us today from Blue Ridge is Brandon Johnson, and he is going to share about some projects they have in that heritage area. Brandon?
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. My name is Brandon Johnson. I am the program manager for the Blue Ridge National Heritage Area. And I am midway through my PowerPoint here, interestingly enough. Cultural arts is kind of our thing, what we're based on. I'm gonna stop sharing and bring this back up so I can do it. And all right, let me try this again. Maybe. There we are. Okay. So sorry about that. Yeah, we're going to talk today about the Blue Ridge Craft Trails, and my son is telling me I'm too loud. So the Blue Ridge National Heritage Area, our 5 heritage assets. Hey, go to your room, please. Go to your room. Okay. We have natural heritage, Cherokee heritage, craft heritage, music heritage, and agricultural heritage. And so we specifically have 2 cultural arts trails based on those assets. We have the Blue Ridge Music Trails and the Blue Ridge Craft Trails. And the Craft Trails is what we've been working on mostly for the past year and what we'll talk about today. So we definitely want to invest in our small towns. Our footprint is the western 25 counties of North Carolina. And these are all, I like to say that they're all the counties where you can at least see mountains, where you're either in the mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains, where you can see them. And so we invest in those small towns, many of which are quite rural, and we're able to see some good impact there. Here's just a quick little glimpse of our Blue Ridge Music Trails. We have this website, Blue Ridge Music NC. We've got a podcast. We've got an annual publication. Lots of things going on there, so please check that out. And then we also have a partnership with the Blue Ridge Parkway. Our main office is at their visitor center in Asheville, North Carolina. It's a great facility, and the Parkway was really bustling eventually last year as we got toward the fall. And so we have our main website, and then a spinoff to the Craft Trails and also a Blue Ridge Music Trails website. And I'm trying to get through these so I can hit the key points. But so the Craft Trails is an idea. We want to be a unified marketing platform for craft in Western North Carolina. There's a rich history of craft going back all the way to the Cherokee peoples, and then into some other organizations in the early 20th century of craft. People know Western North Carolina for craft, but we're working to be the engine where they can say, I'm in Asheville, what can I see that's authentic and handmade? So we definitely want to increase income for artists, enhancing cultural tourism. And it's the tide lifts all boats kind of scenario in terms of craft. Phase one was lots of research and some initial building of the trails. Phase two, which is where we are now, is the build out. We currently have 183 sites on the trails on our website, with lots more to come. We'll have over 300 by the time we're done. We'll be done visiting 24 of the 25 counties in the next couple of weeks, and hope to have a complete trail system by the early fall. And then so that should say phase three there. Will be next year. We're going back for another grant from the Appalachian Regional Commission to launch phase three, which will be programming, sustainability, and training. So really figuring out what it means to have this trail system and how we can serve our artists better. Our Craft Trails homepage is very visitor aimed. We have Google Map functionality with itineraries that we've designed. People can build Google Maps and download those based on what sort of craft they want to see and their location. So here's kind of, we have the regions of our region. Then you can pick sites that you would like to pick. And this is an example of a profile. So as my boss said earlier, we were talking about this, our executive director, she said, well, you've been eating, living, breathing this for the past year. So you can definitely talk about this. And so I've gotten to visit, I'm close to 70 artists this calendar year so far. And so we take pictures, we get to know them. I write a narrative, contact information, search engine optimization, all these things on our profiles. And the online itineraries, which have been county-based and really seek to connect millennials to what we have to offer with breweries and trails and waterways and other experiences too. We ask folks to put up a window cling, carry rack cards for us to help promote. Sorry, bouncing through this quickly. We do lots of social media promotion. We've been working with TDAs and chambers and local folks to help us partner to produce these videos. We've got videos that are social media optimized, Facebook, Instagram. We ask sites to do a couple things, to sell or show handmade craft, provide a contact person, display the window cling. We have reciprocal links. We follow their social media, ask them to follow ours. It's just a general comprehensive promotion strategy. We also have an exhibit, several different exhibits for the regions that can be physically displayed in visitor centers or other places of interest. And so now to our challenges. Our partners are the Appalachian Regional Commission, Cherokee Preservation Foundation, and then TDAs, arts councils, chambers. It's really a grassroots effort with lots of people helping. COVID obviously is I think everyone's number one challenge right now. Lots of uncertainty, based on our state's restrictions and what we could and couldn't do and what was safe. But lots of uncertainty for our artists as well. Not knowing when or how they would feel comfortable having visitors. So we had problems connecting with artists because they didn't know anything that was happening just the way we didn't, and weren't willing to sign on to host people coming to their site. So Handmade in America did the first iteration of this project, which was a Craft Heritage Trails book. And so this is very much a continuation of that project, but kind of an updated digital version. And that organization worked directly with artists, which we did not. So we've had to build that connection. And it's been great and rewarding and enriching, as well as exhausting. I drove over 200 miles to see about 5 sites one day 2 weeks ago. So it's a lot of work, but it's great work to be doing. We started with advisors. We've worked to connect a cross section of people who can be really helpful. Those are TDAs, arts councils, bigger galleries, schools like the John C. Campbell Folk School, anyone who can help us connect to artists. And so we really spent about 6 months trying to get 2 artists, to get them to show interest, to set up visits, so we could write the profiles and get things moving. Changes to the program. We went from large live meetings. We would have community listening sessions with lots of folks. I think we had maybe 3 or 4 different kind of regions where we would work with those. This was before I was working on the program. So all that changed, and we went to Zoom, as we were talking about earlier, which in some ways makes things easier because you don't necessarily have to drive there and you can see it, but you lose a lot of just basic connection and synergy, as everyone knows, not being face-to-face. And so I put this here, it's not necessarily changed, but the artists that we work with, many of whom are older and quasi-retired, or just artists of an artist mindset in general, aren't super fluent in technology. So things like filling out a Word document and emailing it back have been difficult for some folks. So, working through that has been interesting. I had a Facebook call with a glass blower because we couldn't link up, and they're about 2.5 hours away from us. So I called them on Facebook Messenger and watched him blow glass and talked to him. It was pretty interesting. And so we went from a community by community to any way we could. So we had smaller meetings with Main Street coordinators, anybody in an area who we thought could be helpful with us to find and connect us to artists. And so that's the big thing, how we did the work. This is very boots to the ground, meet people kind of work that had to go completely digital. And then eventually, I think in August, we had our first visit. That was the first time I went anywhere in this job because I started last May. Surprises, it's kind of a good surprise and not an extreme surprise, but we were pleasantly surprised with all the support for our project. The artists were very excited and grateful for that. Municipalities were excited. And one of the reasons is we had done so much of this legwork before. We didn't have to pitch something that was going to happen. We could pitch something that existed and we could show it to them. So that was really helpful. We've had just lots of good energy around the project. And as everybody knows, from that kind of March to May window, everything was shut down. Lots of people closed their doors. Our curator at one point would go to downtowns and just look in closed shops to try to get a feel for them and see if they might be a good fit once they open back up. But in Western North Carolina, which is small, which is rural, mountainous, lots of outdoor options, we were honestly slammed in the last half of the year. We talked, probably more than half of the artists we talked to said they had, if not had their best year ever, the best kind of 6 months they'd ever had in the last 6 months of 2020. So we're really hoping in Western North Carolina we can build on that, expand our markets and the people that want to come here. So that was definitely a really good surprise. So our lessons learned, virtual skills and resources are not going anywhere. So we're, going to employ those in ways. I think hopefully we have a hybrid model where we can get out and visit with people, but also a model where we can just schedule a Zoom call really quickly if something comes up. We've learned that it's really essential to customize per artist or community. And so right now, when I'm out visiting, I might see 7 different artists in a day, and you're traveling there, you're trying to get to know someone, you're answering their questions. And everyone needs something a little bit different from you, and we can benefit everybody in a different kind of way. So being really flexible to learn and be able to customize what we can offer people And fluid definitions is really important. Our definition of craft is 3D and handmade. So this kind of excludes painting and photography, but we've had printmakers, and we've had a great folk art painter who also does fiber work. And so we've had to kind of be a little more fluid with that to help include other people. Make quick decisions with the goal in mind. We've always have to keep our goal in mind about what we want to build and be able to change quickly if we need to. And this has been very much a listen first and build the cross-section of advisors project. I tell people we can't roll into a community and tell that community what's best for it. And that's not what we want to do. So we very much try to listen. And you must have a great team. We have an excellent admin who works with the data, keeps all the information. We have a curator who is a Southern Highlands Craft Guild Lifetime Achievement Award winner. Our executive director is really working to raise funds. We have a communications manager who helps us get the word out. And then I'm developing a relationship with artists and writing profiles. So it's a team of 5 that really makes this thing work. And so our outcomes, this is a massive cultural arts project. And so it's really hard to get any kind of objective outcome until it's existed for about 5 years. Complicating that further is COVID and not necessarily, visitations being strange, half the year being kind of closed down. So we don't really have outcomes that we can demonstrate yet, but we have succeeded in building the plan. We're moving toward completion this year. So we're excited with the partnerships we've built and the other things that we've had going. And excitement and awareness are growing. People are learning about us, reaching out because they've seen somebody else's profile. And really, we're just, excited to launch this and very excited for phase 3 next year when we can decide what it really means to have a trail like this. So there's our website, blueridgecrafttrails.com, Brandon at blueridgeheritage.com. Happy to answer any questions, and I'm glad to share some about the work we've been doing.
Okay, and Brandon, we will hold questions to the end because I want to make sure we get to John before we get to questions. So, and our last heritage we're going to hear from, and then as soon as we're done with that, we'll open it up to questions, is Rivers of Steel National Heritage Area, and joining us from there is John Engel. John?
Hey everybody. Yeah, like Heather said, I'm from Rivers of Steel. We're a heritage area in Pennsylvania, around Pittsburgh, especially in like the Mon Valley, Allegheny Valley, and Ohio Valley, 3 rivers that converge in Pittsburgh. And I'm the Heritage Arts Coordinator there. So let me pull up my PowerPoint. Cool, you can see a little peek in my notes. Okay. So yeah, Rivers of Steel is perhaps a little bit different than a lot of national heritage areas in that we are founded around industrial history and industrial sites instead of more natural resources. Yeah, sorry, I'm checking my notes now. So basically what occurred was in the Rust Belt in the late 80s, late 70s through late 80s, a lot of mills, etc., closed down in our area, and particularly in the neighborhood of Homestead, just outside of Pittsburgh, a lot of community organizers got together and decided, hey, even though these mills are closing down, as historical sites, they might still prove useful for the culture and economy of our area. So the focus of Rivers of Steel, which I'll talk a lot about today, and which my boss, Chris McGinnis, will talk about next week in the Contemporary Arts presentation, has always been on both historical preservation and using history and related arts as a means of economic stimulus and cultural sharing and community building. We own a few different sites in southwestern Pennsylvania. Here are 5 of them. On the left there, you got the W.A. Young Foundry, which is a standard like metal foundry. In the middle, you got Carey Furnaces, which is a huge blast furnace in Rankin, Pennsylvania, that we have turned into a tour site and art exhibition site. Much smaller across the river in Homestead. On the right there, you got the Homestead Pump House, which is the pumps for a mill. On the bottom right, you got the Bush Building, which is our base, which was the headquarters for the 1892 Homestead strike that some of you may have heard of. And then on the left there, bottom left, we have our boat, which is the Explorer Riverboat that we acquired a few years ago, which we use for river tours, historical tours of the whole city, and especially the Mon River. So where is the Mon River? For those of you who may not have been to southwestern Pennsylvania, there's a map. Basically, the river flows from Pittsburgh, where it joins with the Allegheny and Ohio rivers, down into northern West Virginia, around, blanking on the name of the town. Been there many times, but northern West Virginia. The Mon Valley is, again, a kind of Rust Belt area, pretty industrial still, or post-industrial, filled with a lot of historical places like Rivers of Steel takes care of, including functioning mills like the Charleroi Works, photographed there, and old abandoned mills or other industrial sites have been turned into historical monuments like the stacks there in Homestead on the bottom. Our work in the Mon Valley is in the arts program, mainly focused on what we call the Mon Valley Creative Corridor, which is a program instituted by my boss, Chris, to use the arts and creative acts as a means of economic stimulus and cultural strengthening within this specific area of the state, although our National Heritage Area covers, I think like 9 counties all across Western Pennsylvania. Yeah. So my specific program underneath the Rivers of Steel Arts program is the Heritage Arts program. Heritage Arts is a little bit different, defined a little bit differently than like folk arts program. The definition that I use, generally speaking, is a heritage art is any art tradition that is passed down from one person to another person within like a close-knit community across several generations. Usually taught informally by like a family member, another community member, someone even on a job, et cetera, et cetera. So per that definition, we focus a lot on like folk art and traditional art, but also on occupational arts, urban arts, anything that is iterated across a generation in that kind of heritage format. And the reason for that focus is our program developed alongside our historical preservation of industrial sites. And it became a way early on in the company's existence, in the heritage area's existence, to like network with workers who and their families in a broader sense than just like, what was it like working in the mills, but form comprehensive and holistic connections with them that we could use to build programming around and build tighter relationships within the community. Pictures of some local artists on this slide. On the left, I don't know if you can tell, but those paintings on the ground are made out of dyed sawdust. This is a tradition that is maintained in Rentham up in the Allegheny River at a church called Holy Martyrs Parish. Every year for the Feast of Corpus Christi, they make like a dozen of these beautiful sawdust paintings in their parking lot, and you're supposed to walk around them to approach the feast. On the top right, we got some musicians from local traditions. Got Jerry Gerkman, I believe is his name, or Gersevich, not sure, who is a traditional Croatian musician. His family immigrated here to Pittsburgh like many Eastern Europeans did. He maintains their music. Next to him, we have Mimi Zhang, who is a traditional Chinese musician and a more recent musician. So a lot of what we do is focused on maintaining those immigrant traditions alongside those industrial traditions. So crucially, I was only hired as the Heritage Arts Coordinator in January. Our Heritage Arts program kind of folded between 2008 and 2016 as a result of the recession. And when my boss Chris took over the program again in 2016, forming a comprehensive arts program, the Heritage Arts was folded in to the arts program alongside several other arts programs that we do that he will be discussing on next month's call. I was just appointed this year to sort of enlarge and expand on our Heritage Arts programming and our Heritage Arts network. And how do you do that in the middle of a global plague? Came up with a few ways. Our biggest and most successful program has been our Heritage Highlights interview series that I've been doing monthly since January, which are simply online interviews with the artists, heritage artists around us, focused on not only their art, but also how their art fits into their lives and their lifestyles. So for example, I've three of the artists I've interviewed over the past 4 months up here. On the left, we have Ben Asan, who is a Turkish calligrapher. For Ben, who is a Turkish immigrant to Pennsylvania, he didn't learn this traditional Turkish art until he moved here. And learning this calligraphy that is practiced among like religious scholars in his culture, it became a way for him to connect with other Turkish immigrants and build community in a foreign country. In the middle, we have Christine Bethia, who is a quilt artist, textile artist here in Pittsburgh. Christine learned to make quilts from her grandmother. Her mother was a quilt maker. So her quilt making, like a lot of African-American women, is a way for her to connect to her history and her community that way. And then on the far right there, we have Kathleen Ferry, who is a folk painter in town. Kathleen didn't learn to paint until she was in her late 50s, early 60s. She learned to paint at her retirement home, and she paints the town that she grew up in. Small towns like Wilmerding and Turtle Creek in Pittsburgh, or near Pittsburgh, that most people have never heard of. And her painting became a thing for her to do with her time as a widow, and to preserve this history. So all that is just to say, like, what I think is so interesting about this program, what I try to do in this program, is build deep relationships with people across all of their lifestyle, understand how the art fits in and how we can benefit them as an organization through that. One of the programs we provide or help provide to benefit these artists, Rivers of Steel, is part of the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts' Folk Arts Partnership Program. Basically what that means is we work with the state government to get folk artists funding. The biggest funding that we do are these master apprentice grants. Here are some of the people who have received those grants. Basically what those grants boil down to is we will pay folk artists who are part of long-standing art traditions to teach their art tradition to a new generation. And the state does that. Rivers of Steel helps these artists fill out their application and stay aware of opportunities like that on a state level. So, you know, for the Heritage Highlights, what we're trying to do is build relationships through these grants. What we're trying to do is translate those relationships to concrete benefits for not only the artists, but the communities that they're part of, that their traditions arise from, so that those arts can continue for a new generation. And then we have the more programming side of things. Rivers of Steel runs a few art festivals in a normal year, non-pandemic year, throughout Pittsburgh and the surrounding area. I'm most involved in Homestead, which is where we're based, small post-industrial town. All of the mills have been turned into shopping malls and, you know, big empty lots. Where we run Homestead First Fridays. You can see me down at the bottom right there 2 years ago when I was an intern, helping to run First Fridays. Basically, First Fridays and other arts festivals are just opportunities to put together folk artists and contemporary artists, and you know, a bunch of local businesses, bars, restaurants, etc., so that we're all offering programming or deals or whatever on one night, so that we can draw a huge crowd to Homestead and to other neighborhoods where we do things like this. What's important to that, from a traditional arts perspective, is we have traditional artists come by and vend at these spaces that have large comprehensive audiences. You know, people who are coming to drink at bars or to see like contemporary art performances, you know, also in town that same night, so that people who are not exposed to these arts traditions in their daily lives can see them. And hopefully these traditions are practical arts or you know, cultural arts that could become part of their lives. So trying to spread these often very practical art traditions that are either not well known or have been kind of forgotten over the years to new audiences through partnerships with the contemporary arts. Yeah, that is about all I have. I just wanted to conclude with some advice to folks. Libraries, schools, great resources. We're working on some programming now with some local schools and libraries that I don't want to get into because it's not funded yet. But my experience, you know, working with Rivers of Steel is that these community organizations are great for networking traditional artists with their communities. People want to help spread education. Yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you so much, Sean. If you could take your presentation now.
Yep.
All right, we are now going to open it up for questions from our presenters. So if anybody has any questions, remember to unmute yourselves before you ask. And because one of the best things about being in charge is I can ask a question first. So here's my question, and it is for Brandon. Brandon, you were talking about how the Cultural Arts Trail has its own like digital presence. I'm assuming that is separate from Blue Ridge National. Like, does it have its own Facebook and its own Instagram? And does it, can you explain a little bit more about that in comparison to like what you would regularly do for the heritage area?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our programs, our trails, we have a heritage trail, we have the music trail, and we have the craft trails. Our programs and essentially our primary outreach is the ways to connect people to our heritage and our culture. We do have a grants program that is through the heritage area. So that's, you know, having these bigger kind of programs and explaining the umbrella situation there is kind of one of our difficult things to make sense to people. So we have the Blue Ridge National Heritage Area website, which the Craft Trails is part of that website. You can access any of our websites from that one, but that's blueridgeheritage.com. And then Blue Ridge Craft Trails will take you to the Craft Trails website. And then blueridgemusicnc.com will take you to the Blue Ridge Craft Trails. So we have technically 3 websites. And we do, at the moment, we actually found an imposter Blue Ridge Music Trails Instagram account the other day that we've been working on. So if everybody could find that and report it, that'd be great. Kind of kidding. But so we really just work one Blue Ridge National Heritage Area Facebook, or one National Heritage Instagram, and then we have a Heritage Area Facebook and Blue Ridge Music Trails Facebook account. And that popped up last for me because I've been so focused on the craft trails, but am working more with the music trails. I'm a musician, and that's kind of my background. So I was actually working on Facebook plans before this meeting started, but so it's a little complicated in some ways, and you know, I think that's one of our things we have to work to be clear about. Maybe I should have been clear answering that question, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, I think I got what you were saying. I was curious because I would think that while they could be similar audiences, you might have different audiences for the two, like people who are really into music versus people into art. So I was wondering how you were able to balance but thank you. All right. Does anybody else have a question? I'm going to mute myself. Remember to unmute yourself if you're going to ask a question. Or you can put it in the chat. Oh, is there things in the chat? There are, but there.
Brandon, I've got a question for you. I think you kind of touched on this, but so it sounded like it was a little bit of a struggle, like identifying artists. I was wondering, like as the sort of program builds momentum and traction, are you going to open it up to everybody? Are you vetting these artists, or you have an application process? I'm just curious about, I guess, like how you're selecting the folks that you highlight on the trail.
Yeah, that's a great question. The way we've worked is we've worked with our partners to find a list of people and then list of artists that meet the things we're looking for. And that's 3D handmade. It's also got to be someone who wants visitors. We have some great artists who are production. I mean, they're making goods to sell. And so they don't really, entertaining visitors and having that relationship is not part of their model. And so that's a situation where we're like, hopefully you're in a gallery that we represent, or, we can do something to help you. But, if you don't want visitors, that's not what we're doing. But we send out an information form asking for people to fill that out and send it back, which functions as an application. And then so our curator and myself and our coordinator will review those and see if there's anything that immediately can be kicked out. And so, like I said, we've not done painting or photography. And then we'll go visit those people. And so that's to, see what their space is like, see if it's safe. We've had some places that are, 30 miles off of a paved road kind of thing that probably don't work that great for us that we've kind of declined. But so, I mean, there's a location piece, but there's also a physical space piece. When we do those visits, we take pictures so we can use them if we need to in the profile. And that visit's really that last piece. So, I mean, it's a multi-step process. It's not juried as such, which is an important thing to note. We have people who are, legends in their field and people who are just getting started. And one of the things, I would encourage everybody outside of just, it being my job to say this, but to check out our website, because we have just the breadth of craft is amazing. I've learned more about pottery in the past year than I ever thought I would. Lots and lots of potters. We've got a really good group of luthiers who are instrument makers. Lots of fiber folks, glass, metal. We have a guy who does paintings in Venetian plaster, and he's one of probably fewer than 10 people in the world who do anything remotely like what he does. So it's a real joy to get to go meet these people and see all the stuff they do.
Cool, thank you. That does sound really cool.
Yeah.
I have another question. I have one for John this time, kind of similar-ish, but I was just thinking about this sort of, sorry, my daughter's walking around, these arts traditions that are passed down between generations and families and stuff like that. And I think no matter what heritage area you're in, you have that history and you have that heritage, like in your heritage area. I mean, you do. And so from a place, like if you're in a place that's unlike Blue Ridge where that tradition isn't known, like how do we identify those folks, and how do we, start to build around those crafts and those heritage arts that maybe just aren't on our radar at all?
Yeah. We've had a few different approaches to meet people. One, the program existed before 2008. So luckily we were blessed to have huge, I'm going to pull them up right now, huge box of files of our artists that Rivers of Steel worked with back in the day, mostly on that folk arts grant. So part of my job is to publicize the grant and help people submit to it. But the grant does a lot of work for me, that you have this central funding source from the state that will attract people who want to teach their craft, who want to perpetuate these traditions. So that's been very helpful in both bringing our attention to people and offering something concrete to people who we've met to build relationships. Otherwise, I've been seriously looking for artists for like 8 months probably, because I started as a contractor a bit before I got the position. And I feel like part of the difficulty of like the heritage arts framework is defining what constitutes a heritage art. Like, what is an art tradition that is passed down without being something taught in an art school? Because in Pittsburgh, at least, you know, as a large-ish, certainly thinks it's big city, that has a lot of like working fine artists. Like, you have a lot of people who are potters, who are textile artists, who make things that are folk art like, heritage art like, but are really fine art. And what we really want to do is focus more on people who are coming from communities more than like an arts scene. So I do a lot of Googling and looking into people's biographies and going, okay, are you a contemporary artist, fine artist, or are you someone that I would put towards one of these grants or whatever? So yeah, outside of Pittsburgh is where I'm really trying to meet people, because we encompass a lot of like very small old mill towns and whatever. And I would say that personally, being a city boy, I'm still working on that end of things, in all honesty. You know, I really appreciate Brandon's perspective, honestly, of like, I might hit you up later and ask for some advice.
I'll add to that. You know, we're super rural. I mean, I live in Asheville, which is the driving metropolis of Western North Carolina, and it's got fewer than 100,000 people. So, you know, that's a thing for us. But to talk a little bit about, just quickly to add, Sarah, to your question about heritage arts, our music trail is very much traditional arts focused. And that's as wide of a net as we can cast on that. But so there are blues and gospel traditions, bluegrass, old time, unaccompanied church singing in certain ways. So that's very much an organic, you know, folk transmission, knee to knee learning kind of process. Whereas with the thing about the craft trails, to me, that's really exciting, that gives it such a diverse offering, is that it's contemporary as well as traditional. So that's where your definitions are important. Traditional or contemporary 3D handmade craft is what that does. So I think that's been, you know, that's always the thing I've been able to fall back on when somebody's thrown out, this person does this or this person does this, you know, just always got that in the back of my head about what that definition is.
If I might add real quick also, I can't speak to other like traditional arts programs, but the way that we think about traditional and heritage is oftentimes somewhat more contemporary than what people would associate with that. Like at Rivers of Steel, we have a huge like metal arts program and a huge like graffiti arts program that, again, my boss will describe next month. But like there are versions of this kind of like painting and metal working that are traditions in the heritage sense. So like, to Brandon's point of like mixing contemporary and traditional arts, I think the flexibility that describing our program as a heritage program gives us is going, okay, well, if this has been inherited in the past like 50 years, even if it's not like traditional quilting or stuff that would have, you know, pre-colonial or pre-industrial stuff that we might normally associate with those terms, we're still willing to work with them because they have that core community aspect that is at least what we really value.
Cool. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those have been great. All right. We are winding down on time. So if you have a question, please ask it. I don't want to keep us on here if we don't have any, but at the same time, I don't want to shortchange anyone. So. Okay, Sarah, would you like to give us a preview of what next month's call is going to be?
Well, I think we already got a pretty good preview thanks to our presenters. Full disclosure, I'm a former art teacher, so I was really excited about this series. So yeah, so next month's call, Heather, will you confirm the date? May 20 something. We're going to hear from Rivers of Steel again. We're going to hear about their more contemporary art program. And then we're also going to hear from Niagara. Allie is here on the call. And so she's going to be presenting about Niagara's mural program. So more of like public art and contemporary art and how, you know, we can use art to tell our heritage area story. And so we're just going to have 2 presenters next month. So we're going to get to go a little bit more in depth in those programs. So yeah, that's next month.
The date is May 20th for sure.
Thank you. I was right-ish. So, but yeah, so thanks y'all for coming. Really enjoyed hearing the good work that y'all are doing and got my wheels turning. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Well, thank you all. I'm going to close the call out. We will see you next month. Thank you for joining us, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Good evening,
Bye.
everyone.